by a simple executive order. The last piece that I would mention is that another priority for the Asian American community is to obtain relief for about 15,000 Southeast Asian refugees with final orders of deportation. These are longtime permanent residents of the United States that got in trouble with the law when they were young and impoverished. They've served their time and they've been rehabilitated. Yet years later, our government, certainly during the last 4 years, have sought to deport them. And so we applaud the president's work here to sort of halt these provide these temporary enforcement provisions and to prioritize people that sort of prioritize certain people and really take a more careful look at who needs to be deported now, as opposed to sort of looking at that bigger picture to ensure that we have the right pathway. So we're certainly thankful for all of this that the Biden administration has done. We look forward to working with them to see these opportunities and use this bill to demonstrate that racial equity, that racial justice for all.
Thank you so much, John. I'm going to let Henrietta answer her question, ask her question herself. Henrietta.
Thanks so much, Sunita. Many groups in this country have a lot of anxieties and fears about the browning of America. And Frank talked about some of Trump's policies creating backfiring. And I'm wondering, with the opening up of the immigration laws that you just now described, wouldn't this create more anxieties and fears among those who support what Trump represented? And couldn't that cause a backlash eventually?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what Frank said initially about where public opinion is now should be recognized, which is the vast majority of Americans are comfortable with more expanded immigration. They believe in that inclusive America. So the starting point for all of us should be that America is still an inclusive America, and this fear of the browning of America does exist, but it is in a small segment of the American population. And then with that small segment, we must find a way to talk to them. Because the reality is, unless you are a Native American or you are an African American who had ancestors that were brought here forcibly as a slave, all of us are immigrants. And this is a common narrative that we have seen before, whether it is with Italians that came here, the Polish immigrants, or Irish immigrants during the potato famine. There's always this concern of the other that is coming here.
For brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens and adult children of certain U.S. citizens to immigrate. So it's ridiculous. That's not the way Congress intended it to be when the last reform with immigration numbers happened in the 1990 Act. They were thinking that, 2 and 3 year waits would be too long. But now we have waits that stretch into several decades. So what the Biden immigration proposal does, it has a lot of good things. It plans to eliminate visa backlogs, not by infusing more numbers, but by not counting many categories. So for example, family members, the derivative family members, if they're not counted, then that will actually increase the visas in each category every year, because the whole intention was to sponsor the skilled immigrant. But if that person has 4 or 5 family members, why should they be counted in the categories? So it explicitly eliminates the counting of family members. It also carves out other people like STEM degree holders, and it recaptures unused visas. That is also a shame, because every year the administration does not use up visa numbers, and that goes wasted. So this bill attempts to basically get more visas and reduce the backlogs. It also aims to prevent the aging out of children. That's been a tragedy, because even though there's been this focus on DACA children, there are children of legal immigrants who age out and then could fall out of status and be in jeopardy. So because their parents don't get the green card on a time, they waited more than a decade, and then their children turn 21, and now they have to fight their own way in the system. So from an H4 dependent visa, they're forced to switch to an F1 visa, very hard to get when you've already established immigrant intent. And so this bill also attempts to ameliorate the age out situation. It does have a lot of good things, and I really hope it gets passed. And as Frank said, if it can go through a reconciliation measure, that would be ideal. But in addition to this legislative proposal, I think it's been very exciting in the 10 days that Biden has taken over. So, for example, there were lots of midnight regulations that Trump issued that would impact H-1B workers by artificially increasing wages and the like. So there's a 60-day freeze memo that has actually delayed the implementation of 2 or 3 H-1B rules that would impact high-skilled people. And so that 60-day freeze gives the ability to issue more notice and comment and to reconsider and give more time to litigate and challenge these rules as being ultra vires to the Immigration Act. Another great feature is that the Trump administration maliciously tried to rescind the ability of H-4 spouses to get work authorization, while the H-1B spouse was waiting for years in the backlogs, and these H-4 spouses, mainly women, who are also highly skilled and educated, were doing nothing and couldn't work. So this H-4 employment authorization was a great boon. Trump tried to take it away, didn't really succeed, but we just heard a day or two ago that that proposal of Trump to rescind the ability of H-4 spouses to work has been withdrawn. Then Trump also passed bans, and we've heard about the Muslim and African ban that have rescinded on the first day. But there was also the work visa ban and the immigrant visa ban. So these are people who were outside the United States on the day these executive orders were issued or proclamations were issued by Trump last year, and under the guise to protect the American labor force from immigrants who posed a threat to the US labor market during COVID. And a lot of non-immigrants on H visas and L visas have been stranded abroad as a result of these proclamations. And a lot of would-be immigrants who were sponsored by family members have also been stranded abroad. And there has been litigation that has been partially successful, but it's very hard to challenge the president's use of Section 212A(f) to issue these bans. So we've just heard, as of yesterday and even today, that on Tuesday, the immigration day was going to be today, but I think they're waiting for Mayorkas to get confirmed on Monday evening. And then on Tuesday,
with this bill was that these folks were not given approval of their green cards. And up until October of last year, just about 2,600 people had actually gotten a chance to apply because of the additional guidelines that were added to the application process. One of the rules that was particularly egregious and mirrors actually the new rule for the diversity visa is that folks had to have a valid unexpired passport. And this is difficult in a lot of countries around the world during normal times, but we can only imagine how difficult it is during the times of COVID. So we needed the Liberian DED, deferred and forced departure, to be extended so that folks would be able to access work permits and a stay removal while they're able to apply for the program. And our hope is that we are able to bring up those numbers, and so that's really hopeful. I touched a little bit about diversity visa, and I know John mentioned it as well. So the diversity visa numbers in the Biden Day 1 bill, which has not yet been introduced in Congress, but we got the memo for. We're pleased that in it, it increases the diversity visas from 55,000 to 80,000. And this is important because, one, the diversity visa program is one of the programs that is normally axed out first when we're talking about building or changing immigration at all. In fact, it was a key one that was debated in 2018 when we were talking about DACA and changing that. And the Congressional Black Caucus really stood up, and advocates like Ondaki Black and others stood up. Why? Because over 60% of the folks who get the diversity visa are from African countries. It is primarily one of the only ways that they are able to come to the United States. We anticipate that there will be a change to the current rule that was also instituted under Trump, which was a passport rule, similar to the passport rule that they put in the LARIF, that's the Liberian Green Card Program. And based on our estimates, this would ban about 8 million people from applying for the diversity visa. The diversity visa does bring in about 11 million applications every year, even though only 55,000 people will be chosen. And of the 8 million that we expect to be barred, about 5 million of those are Africans. The next bit I'll talk about is TPS for Black countries, or TPS in general. So the Dream and Promise Act, of course, passed out of the House June 4th, 2019, another really landmark moment. But in that bill, it was for folks who would be Dream eligible, of which quite a significant majority are minority, are Black immigrants from all across the world. And then the second section of that bill was specifically for TPS and for DEP. For
Therese,
Liberian.
I'm so sorry, just a bit slower. Our interpreter has. I'm terribly sorry to interrupt you.
So sorry.
No worries.
I was trying to meter myself. Okay, going. Okay, so the Dream and Promise Act, June 4th, 2019, Dreamers, TPS, DEP. I think many folks are familiar with the first half of the bill because that's most common. Because that was for folks who were children who migrated here. The second half of the bill is multi-ethnic, multiracial, and different ages, for sure, and quite a number. The majority of the actual countries are Black countries, but the numbers are mostly for Central America. So it included countries like Guinea and Sierra Leone, and Liberia, Sudan, Somalia, South Sudan, Haiti. Haiti makes up a sizable population there. And so we do hope that in the package that we're working on as advocates, and that Congress is indicating that they are interested in taking up, they will pass this bill again, and we will actually get it passed into law. Currently, for temporary protected status, the countries that were involved with the lawsuits, their work permits and their stay of deportations is only valid until October 4th of this year. So we are hoping that that gets reinstated. And then there are a few other countries that really do need protection that we are hoping may be granted status. Just yesterday, we did have a redesignation and an extension of status for Syria. This is really important because when we talk about extension of temporary protected status, which is granted by DHS Secretary, that means only the people currently covered are able to access the status. But if we do redesignation and we change the date, then that means that new folks are also able to benefit. And that's what they did yesterday for Syria, and that's the first time that has been done in over 4 years. The last bit I'll mention is just for the Muslim and African ban. The Muslim ban, the third iteration of it, really brought in other countries, the majority of which were Black. So Nigeria, Tanzania was involved. Sudan and Eritrea were already in the first iteration. And so we're happy to see that rescinding, and also the promise of the Biden administration that they will expedite visa applications that are pending right away as well. There are other visa sanctions that we need to have overturned, and I believe John mentioned those, so I won't go over them, but we're looking forward to that. And then the actual last thing is about the moratorium. So earlier, the word aggravated felon was mentioned. I want to note